Okay, so this is the third part, the third video or the third recording on the Constitution. We've already finished the preamble, which says why the Constitution was made. We've already finished Article 1, which is all about the legislature, how the representatives and the senators are chosen, what their duties are, what they can do, what they cannot do. We've talked about Article 2, which is about the executive, how the president is chosen, the duties and the responsibilities of the president, how he can be impeached and removed. And so we come on to Article 3, the third branch of government. Remember, the founding fathers decided to separate the government into three parts: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And they separated the government into three parts because they were afraid that the new government would become like the British government, like the King of England, George III, that they would become a dictator. They didn't want one person to have all the power, and so they separated the power, and they limited the power, and they balanced the power. An example of balancing the power was the legislature could make the law if both houses agree. But before it became a law, the president had to sign it. So this is an example of balancing the power. And if the president refused to sign it, if he vetoed it, it went back to the legislature. And if they vote again with a supermajority, that is 2/3 of both houses, well, then it could still become a law. So this is balancing the power, separating, balancing, checking the power between each of the three branches of government. Now today, we're going to start by looking at the third branch of government, the judicial branch, the courts, the judges. And you might remember that in Article 1 of the Constitution, it said that the legislature has the power to create lower courts. You remember that? Well, that's because Article 3 of the Constitution only creates one court, the Supreme Court. So this is going to focus on the Supreme Court, the highest court. It is not looking at the lower courts. Now, you know, in a country, you cannot have only one court. Only one court for the whole of the country? Well, you'd be waiting years before you get to see the judge. So, no. Every state, every city will have their own court. Every state will have their own court. Every area will have what's called a circuit court. The Supreme Court is going to be the highest court. Article 3, Section 1. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested, that means placed, remember. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior, that's lower. Inferior can mean lots of different things, weaker, lower, but in this sense it means lower. So, in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The Constitution makes one Supreme Court, one highest court for the whole of the country. Congress may make inferior courts, lower courts, but none of the courts that Congress makes has more power than the Supreme Court. When you go to court, if you don't agree with the judge, with the verdict, with the decision of the court, you can always appeal. Appeal means ask again. But when you ask again, you cannot ask the same court because you get the same decision. And you cannot ask a court that is the same level because they are equal. So when you appeal, you always go to a higher court. So, for example, if you were in Mierwadi and the Mierwadi town court gave a decision that you didn't like, you could appeal to the state court in Pa'an. And if you didn't agree with the state court in Pa'an, you could agree to the federal court in Naypyidaw. You could go up and up. Similar when you're in a school. Maybe when you are in CDC school, maybe your class teacher says something that you don't agree with. And so you might appeal to Thramu Golding, because she is the head of the high school. And if she says something that you don't agree with, you might go to Thramirnan when he was the vice principal. And if you don't agree with Thramirnan, then finally you might ask Manshweni. But once you've asked Manshweni, can you ask anybody else? No. Once you have asked the Supreme Court, you cannot ask anybody else, because you are at the top. There is no court higher than the Supreme Court. Even if you do not like the decision of the Supreme Court, you have no choice. You have to accept. The judges, both of the Supreme Court and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior. Shall hold their offices during good behavior. Does that say how many years that they will be judged for? No. And it doesn't say how many years, because a Supreme Court judge is a judge until they decide to stop. There is no limit on how long they will be a judge for. Okay? There's no time limit. The only limit, it says, is good behavior. So if a Supreme Court judge or another federal judge that is chosen by the president and agreed by the Senate, if they do something bad, or they are corrupt, or they take a bribe, then Congress can impeach them. And the Senate can put them on trial, and if they are found guilty, they will be removed from office. Just like the president, they can also be impeached and removed from office for bad behavior. But that's the only reason why they can be removed. Now, we're not talking about the state judges, we're not talking about the city judges. In many places in America, the judges are elected by the people. But we're talking about federal judges for the whole country, and Supreme Court judges, justices. Now, a Supreme Court justice is chosen for their lifetime. They may get old and decide that they are too old to continue. They may retire. They may send a letter saying they want to stop, and that means they retire. Or they may continue until they die. Or they can be impeached for bad behavior. But this is an important point. The idea of the Founding Fathers was that the judges would be impartial. That means they will not be biased. Because once they are chosen, they have their job for the rest of their lives. They don't have to make a decision that the president will like. They don't have to make a decision that Congress will like. They don't have to make a decision that the people will like. Because the president does not have to choose them again, Congress does not need to vote for them again, and the people do not need to elect them again. They have their job forever. Now, if you are president, you always try to make decisions that your people will like because you want to be voted in again. So you make a popular decision. Not always the right decision, but a popular decision. Now, the judges don't need to be worried about being popular. They can focus, at least this is the idea of the Constitution, they can focus on being right, on being just, on doing what the law says, whether it is popular or not, because they have their job for life, and they do not need to be elected again. They shall receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. They will be paid. They will be paid, and it cannot be diminished. It cannot be lowered during the whole time that they are in office. That means even if they make a decision that people don't like, well, they can't lower them. They can't lower their salary. That would be one way of trying to force them out of office. But the Constitution says they cannot be punished. They cannot be lowered like that. Now, you were given some questions for homework, I seem to remember. So make sure you have your homework answers nearby. What is the highest type of court? Question 35. Supreme Court. And what are the other courts? Inferior courts. Inferior means lower. So answer for 35 is Supreme Court and inferior courts. The judicial power shall extend to all cases, in all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made, or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, and to controversies to which the United States shall be a party. Now, let's break this down. Judicial power of the Supreme Court is for all cases under the law of the Constitution and under the law of the United States. So if it is about what the Constitution says, the Supreme Court has the power to act. If it is about the law that is made by America, the Supreme Court has the power to act. Cases affecting ambassadors and other public ministers and consuls. So any case that affects somebody who works for the government of America, ambassadors to other countries, or public ministers like secretaries of state, consuls, legal, lawyers, any case about an American government official is under the Supreme Court. To all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Admiralty is like the leader of the Navy. Maritime means sea. So any cases about what happens in the sea. So about two ships that attack each other, piracy, things like that, it's under the Supreme Court. And to treaties. Treaties means laws between different countries. It's under the Supreme Court. To controversies between two or more states. So if two different states are arguing with each other, the Supreme Court has the right to make a decision. Between citizens of different states. Well, if it's a legal case between people in different states, for example, New York and New Jersey, it's under the Supreme Court. Why? Well, if one person lives in New York and one person lives in New Jersey, the court in New York has no power over the person in New Jersey. But the court in New Jersey has no power over the person in New York. So, the Supreme Court has the power over both of them. and also about different land grant of different states. So if the states are arguing about where their boundary finishes, the Supreme Court will make a decision. If they're arguing about taking new territory, the Supreme Court will make a decision. In all cases affecting ambassadors and other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have official jurisdiction. That word jurisdiction means the legal power to make a decision. Jurisdiction means the legal power to make a decision. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction. Appellate jurisdiction means the case will not go directly to the Supreme Court. Other courts will hear the case first, and then the person may appeal. So appellate jurisdiction means people, if they do not like the decision of the lower court, may appeal to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction for question 37. So apart from trials, cases about public officials, the Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction. This means that the case will go to a lower court first, and if the people involved do not agree with the decision of the lower court, then the case will be raised up. It will be appealed to the Supreme Court. And that comes from the word appeal. The trial of all crimes, except cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the crime shall have been committed. Now, impeachment is different. Okay? Why is impeachment different? Well, impeachment is different because Congress has the power of impeachment, not the judicial branch. Okay? Congress has the power of impeachment, not the judicial branch. Judges can be impeached by Congress. The president and the vice president can be impeached by Congress, not by the judges, not by the Supreme Court. But it says, all trials shall take place in the place where the crimes have been committed. So if the crime happens in New York, the trial will take place in New York. Now, Section 3 explains what treason is. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them. So if an American person goes to war against the United States, then that's treason. So if America is fighting Great Britain and some American people help Great Britain, that is treason. Or giving their enemies aid and comfort. If Britain is fighting America and an American person secretly hides some British soldiers in their house, they give them help, give them aid, and they give them comfort, making it easier for them. So if you help the people that are fighting against your country, this is treason. If you are fighting directly or helping indirectly, both are examples of treason. But no person can be convicted of treason unless there are two or more witnesses of the same action. So if I say Mosquito was helping the British against America, there must be one more person that also see. If it is only me that see, it is not okay. There must be at least two witnesses. Actually, if you look at the Bible, in the Old Testament in the Bible, that for many crimes there must also be two witnesses. This comes from Deuteronomy in the Bible. Otherwise, one person against one person, how can you choose which person is saying the truth? And especially with treason, the punishment for treason may be forfeiture of life. That means you might be killed for treason. So if I say Mosquito commits treason and Mosquito says he does not commit treason, it is my word against his word. How can you choose which one is telling the truth if there's only one person on each side? But the punishment will be death. So you need more than one person to witness the crime for treason to be proved. But the punishment can only be on the person that does the action, only on the person that does it. It cannot be for his children. So after he is dead, the punishment is finished. You cannot punish every generation of the family. So it's limiting the punishment. That's what this says. The punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture, except during the life the person attained. So the punishment can only be given during his lifetime. After he is dead, the punishment is finished. So he commits treason, the punishment is against him. When he is dead, the punishment is finished. So you cannot continue to punish the family after he is killed. Okay? So it's limiting the punishment. For treason is very emotional. People will hate you if you go against your country. For example, if you help Thailand to invade Karen State, people in your community will hate you. And there is the temptation not just to punish you, but to punish your brothers and your sisters and your uncles and aunties and children and grandchildren. There's a temptation to punish your whole family. And that's why the Constitution says, actually no, for treason, even for treason, the punishment is only during their lifetime. After they are dead, the punishment may not continue. Okay. Question 38 in the homework said, true or false, judges are paid for their service and may remain on the court until they can no longer serve. Is that true? Yes. They are paid and they stay there until they are too old or too ill and they cannot do any longer. So, Article 4. Article 4 of the Constitution is not very important. I am almost sure this will not be in your exam, so we're going to go quite quickly through Article 4. Okay. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of each other state. That means if the judge in one state makes a decision, the other states have to follow that decision. Okay? The states cannot argue against each other. They have to recognize that if one judge makes a decision, then that's a decision that can be followed in other places as well. Okay? And the Congress may, by general laws, prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. Congress can make a rule about how the decisions of each court are recorded and how they are shared. One thing that happens in courts is often when you are trying to make a case, when you're trying to prove something, you might use the example of one that has already happened in the past. Later, we will talk about education and should education be separated into black school and white school or not? Well, when the case goes to the Supreme Court, they will use the example of previous decisions to show why the decision should be this way or that way. There's a case that's in your book, which is called Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson is not about education, but Plessy versus Ferguson is about a black man traveling in the white area of a train. And should he be allowed to travel in a white area, or should they be separated into black area and white area? Later, when they are talking about separating school into black school and white school, they refer to Plessy versus Ferguson. to give an example of what judges in the past had already decided. That's what Section 1, Article 4 is about. That judges must follow the example of the past. Even if it is in a different state, they should follow the example of other judges. And Congress will make a rule about how to share the decisions, how to keep a record of the decisions for other judges to follow. Section 2. The citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. You are born in Pa'an, you are a Burmese citizen. If you go to Molamine, you are not in Karen state anymore, you are in Mon state. But you are still a Burmese citizen. That's what Section 2 means. Doesn't matter which of the colonies you are born in, if you go to live in one of the other colonies, the other colony must still recognize you as a citizen and give you all of the rights of a citizen. They cannot limit your rights just because you are born in a different area. So New York person can go live in North Carolina, Georgia person can go live in Massachusetts. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime, who shall flee from justice and be found in another state, shall, on the demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. So, for example, Mosquito lives in New York and he murders somebody. He runs away to Pennsylvania. The police in New York cannot go into Pennsylvania because the police in New York only have jurisdiction, only have authority in New York. But the leader of New York can ask the leader of Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania police to arrest him and then send him back to New York. That's what Section 2 is saying. If you commit a crime and you run away to a different state, even though the police cannot follow you to that state, the executive can ask the executive of the other state to have you arrested and send you back. You cannot commit a crime and then escape from justice just by running away to a different place. Section 3. New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union. So there can be new states added. And we know we start with 13 states, and today there are 50 states. So many states have been added over the years. This is where the power to add the new states comes from. Article 4, Section 3. But no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislators of the states concerned as well as of the Congress. New states can be added, but the land of the new state cannot come from one of the old states unless the legislature of the state and the legislature of the federal country both agree. So Virginia was very big. If they divide Virginia into Virginia and West Virginia, the Virginia state legislature have to agree, and the federal legislature in Washington, D.C. also had to agree. They couldn't just take away some area by themselves. They have to have the agreement of the Congress at the state level and the Congress at the federal level. Section 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or the executive against domestic violence. Every state has the right to a republican form of government. Republican form of government means there are representatives representing you. So every state will have a legislature and an executive and judiciary. Okay. There is the federal Congress for the whole country, but every state has their own legislature. There is the president, the leader of the executive for the whole country, but every state shall have a governor. There is the Supreme Court of the whole country, the federal Supreme Court, but every state will also have their own state court. And the Constitution will protect the states from fighting against each other. The Constitution says the states cannot fight against each other. There must be domestic peace. There is a law against domestic violence. That means domestic means at home, violence means fighting. So the state cannot fight each other. Article 5 is quite short. But Article 5 is extremely important. Now, before we do that, question 39. All state laws, records, and court decisions that are made in one state are also in effect in other states. This is known as sign? Yeah, full faith and credit. Question 39, full faith and credit. Question 40. Can a person who is charged with a crime in one state flee to another state, be sent back to where he did the crime? Yes or no? Yes. 39 and 40 were from Article 4. Now, Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified. There are 2 steps to changing the Constitution. Now, another word for change is amend. Okay? Amend. A-M-E-N-D. Amend. Amend means to change. There are 2 steps to amend the Constitution. Step 1, propose. Step 2, ratify. Step 1 is propose. That means suggest. Step 2, ratify. Ratify means agree. So amendment must be proposed and the amendment must be ratified. Let's deal with stage 1 first, the proposal. There are 2 places that can propose an amendment to the Constitution. The first is in line 1 and line 2. Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments. Who can propose an amendment? Congress. What fraction of each house needs to agree? 2/3. Not a half. 2/3 was also the supermajority, remember. If you want to override the presidential veto, then 2/3 is needed to override the presidential veto. So, 2/3 of both houses, 2/3 of both houses need to agree if you're going to propose an amendment to the Constitution. This is because the Constitution is the highest law of the land. If you make it really easy to change, then every president that comes in can change it. But this law is supposed to control the president. This law is saying how the president and how the government need to act. So it has to be difficult to change. So option 1, if 2/3 of Congress, 2/3 of the representatives and the Senate agree, then an amendment can be proposed. Option 2, 2/3 of the state legislatures can vote to propose an amendment. The state legislatures from every state can meet together, and remember the word for a meeting is convention. We talked about the Constitutional Convention before, when they met together to make the Constitution. This is the legislature holding a convention, holding a meeting. And if 2/3 of the state legislatures agree, then an amendment can be proposed. So, the same fraction, but either from Congress or from the state legislature. Now, it can be ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof. What fraction? 3/4, 3/4. Yeah. So to propose, to suggest the amendment, 2/3 need to agree. To agree the amendment, 3/4 need to agree. 3/4 of who? 3/4 of the states. Now, either every state legislature will vote, and when you have 3/4 of the states agree, then the amendment can be ratified and become part of the Constitution. Or there can be a convention, there can be a meeting in each state. And if 3/4 of the state agree, then it also becomes an amendment. So, do you see the president in Article 5, yes or no? No. Do you see the judge? No. This comes up quite often. If you're talking about making an amendment to the Constitution, if you see an answer that talks about the president or the executive, it will be wrong. If you see an answer that talks about the judges, it will be wrong. Because the power to amend, the power to change the Constitution is only in the legislative branch. It is not signed by the president. One difference between an amendment and a law is normally signed by the president. The amendment is never signed by the president. Okay? Amendments are only made by the legislative branch of government. The other two branches have nothing to do with it. And if you remember that, and then you get 4 multiple choice answers about how an amendment is made, and you see one or two answers are about executive or judicial branch, those answers you can take away very quickly. And it will help you to find the right answer. Okay? So it's very important that you remember amendments to the Constitution are only made by the legislative branch. So, two stages. Stage one is the proposal stage. At the proposal stage, either 2/3 of both houses of Congress or 2/3 of the state legislatures meeting together in a national convention have to agree before the amendment can be proposed. I can tell you that no amendment has been proposed by the state legislature. Every one of the 26 amendments has been made, 27 amendments, every one of the 27 amendments has been made by a proposal of 2/3 of Congress. Stage two is the ratification stage. Ratification means 3/4 of the state legislatures or 3/4 of special meetings in each state have to agree. After 3/4 agree, it says it shall be, to all intents and purposes, part of this Constitution. Okay. It's about line 5. It says, once an amendment has been proposed and ratified, the amendment is part of this Constitution. It has the same power as the rest of this Constitution. Amendments are only made for very important issues, like women's right to vote, or ending slavery, or giving black people the right to vote, or giving people in Washington, D.C. the right to vote for the president. Remember I said yesterday, or the day before, that people in Washington, D.C. could not vote for the president in the beginning. Because in Washington, D.C. there is no representative and no senator. So they had no elector. So they had no vote. But one of the amendments gave them the right to vote for the president. It gave them 3 electors. So, constitutional amendments are about voting, are about freedom, are about high legal issues. And to make an amendment is a 2-step process. 2/3 must agree for it to be proposed, and 3/4 must agree for it to be ratified. Okay. Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under the Constitution as under the Confederation. All of the old debt, all of the borrowing, all the debt owed by the 13 colonies now becomes the debt of America. They cannot run away. They cannot say, oh, now we are a new country. No, we don't pay you. No, it says all of the debt that we have now becomes the debt of America. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. So the Constitution is the highest law. And any law that matches the Constitution, any treaty made in accordance with the Constitution, this is the law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. So the judges must follow the Constitution. They cannot make their own law. They cannot do what they like. The judges must uphold the Constitution. Also, if you remember, when we talked about Article 2, the President, he says, I affirm that I shall uphold and defend the Constitution of America. The President has to promise, make an oath on the Bible, that he will defend and follow the Constitution of America. The Constitution is the highest law of the whole land, of the whole country. No law can be made that breaks the Constitution. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So, every senator, every representative, every judge, every governor, every ambassador, they must promise, they must make an oath, they must affirm that they will uphold the Constitution. They're not allowed to break it. Nobody is above the law. Nobody is above the Constitution. The Constitution is made to protect the people from leaders that would be corrupt or abusive. No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Freedom of religion. There is no religious requirement for any of the officers of the United States. That means you can be Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu or Jew or atheist, no religion. There is no limit on religion. You are not allowed to be rejected because you are a different religion. Every religion is welcome. A little bit different to the early colonists. Remember we talked about Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, you had to be a member of the church before you could be a leader in the Massachusetts government. Well, the Constitution ends that idea. After the Constitution is made, no state and no federal office can limit people because of their religion. And this also will come up in the Bill of Rights in Amendment 1, the Freedom of Religion Clause. Finally, Article 7. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same. How many states are there?
9 states.
No, there are 13 states. Okay. Remember the colonies? There are 13 states. But how many states need to agree for the Constitution to become law? 9. 9 states need to agree for this to become law, but actually, there are 13 states in total. William Jackson was the secretary. A test means written by. So this was written by, prepared by William Jackson. And it was done in convention by the unanimous consent, by everybody agreeing. Unanimous means everybody. Consent means agree. Of the states present on the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787. So on the 17th of September 1787, the people who are on the next page all signed to say that they agree. Who's the name underneath that? Do you see?
Washington.
Okay. George Washington was the president of the convention, and he was the deputy from Virginia. So when they met at the beginning of this meeting to agree the Constitution, this meeting went on for a long time. But when they met at the beginning of this meeting, remember there were lots of different issues. Some people wanted equal representation, others wanted proportional representation. Some wanted taxation on the slaves, others said slaves should only be counted for representation. Others wanted direct election of the president, others didn't want direct election of the president. Others wanted states to be independent, others wanted a strong central government. There were lots of arguments, there were lots of discussions before they could make this constitution. And they had to choose somebody to be the chairman of the meeting, or the president of the meeting, president of the convention. And they chose George Washington because he wasn't really part of any big political party. George Washington didn't like political parties. George Washington wanted everybody to work for the good of the country. Actually, when he said goodbye after being president for 8 years, he warned the whole country to be very careful of political parties. Because he said, as political parties rise up, they will care about themselves. They will not care about what is good for the country, they will care about what is good for themselves. And he was very famous, not just as a general who had defeated the British, but he was famous for not being part of a political party, of being somebody that was always trying to compromise, find the best way for the country. And so he was chosen as the president of the convention. And then he was chosen as the first president of America, because he was somebody that could unite, who could bring people with different ideas together. Now, do you notice there's one state missing? Do you notice that?
No.
Rhode Island is missing. Rhode Island was very strongly independent. Rhode Island didn't send anybody to the Constitutional Convention. They were having this idea maybe they would become an independent country, even though it's so tiny. They thought maybe we can be independent, so they didn't send anybody. That's why 9 states had to agree, because only 12 states went to the Constitutional Convention. 75%, 3/4 of 12 is 9. Okay? So 9 states had to agree. 9 states had to ratify this constitution because 12 states were represented at the constitution. 1 state had refused to go, Rhode Island. Later, any state that wanted to be part of the United States of America had to ratify this constitution as well. They could not become part of the United States of America until they had ratified, agreed that they would follow by this constitution. Rhode Island, they also agreed later. So they were part of the United States. Now, just remember, really important for your exam, the preamble. It talks about we the people of the United States. Very important. Go and listen to that bit again. Article 1, how the legislature is chosen. Also very important. Article 2, how the executive is chosen. Very important. Article 5, how the amendments are made. Very important. The preamble, Article 1, Article 2, Article 5. These are very important parts. Okay? Now, I'm going to put this online again and you can listen